Welcome to the VMJPod Graduate Recruitment Series, where we dive into the latest trends and innovations in early career hiring, featuring insights from industry top experts driving the future of talent acquisition.
Well, welcome to VMJPod. I'm David.
Steve from GHD.
And we are very excited to have James from Capgemini, who is creating belonging and authentic connections with graduates at Capgemini. James, welcome.
Pleasure to be here.
All right. Well, hey, look, James, I know we've known each other for a bit and you know, obviously we've been doing some intros off mic as well, but I guess for those who are listening that maybe don't know a little bit about you, let's get the 60-second snapshot, the career history, the tenure with Capgemini, because it's, from an outsider's perspective, it's been pretty meteoric the last 2 to 3 years.
Yeah, absolutely. So interestingly enough, I was a graduate myself, with Capgemini. So I'd like to think that I have that sort of extra layer of empathy, and when I went through the program myself, I noticed things that, that maybe I could improve, just subtly at that time. And I had this amazing full circle opportunity midway through my consulting to create and move into the HR space. Now, like a lot of careers these days, believe me, a lot of careers, they're not really that linear, and I think, my parents' generation, at least, they tended to be that way. My parents sort of worked for the same company 50 years and then retired. That seemed to be a little bit more commonplace. But
So did mine, by the way.
It seems common, yeah. It seems common. And I mean, for me, I'm pretty emblematic of what a graduate career is like now. I bounced all over the place and I couldn't make my mind up. And I think there's a lot of students now in the same situation. I wanted to be a comedian. That was always my dream. And then, fortunately, my dad convinced me to go to university, which I did, and I ended up doing a law degree. I worked for sort of a community legal center voluntarily, did my articles there, and then decided I wanted to get into academia, made another decision. So it's just me not making up my mind again. And I was at a Christmas party, would you believe it? And one of my wife's, my then girlfriend, now wife's friends, said to me, well, you can't make up your mind. Well, I'm in management consulting, right? And I have a law degree. Why don't you try that? And so I thought, oh gosh, maybe this will help me sort myself out. So, I needless to say, I researched it. I liked it. I like computers as well. It was tech consulting. So I thought, okay, well, why not give this a go? It was a very, very different interview process back then. It was a very, very different graduate program. But yeah, thankfully, they took a chance on me and ended up working for the company. That's, it's a long time ago now. I think that's about a decade. It's my 9th year. So
wow. Well, look, I have no doubt that the team at Capgemini would be thinking this is absolutely paid dividends for them. Dave and I were talking before you came here that I think this year, for the first time, at least that I can remember, Capgemini took out the top most popular graduate employer award with both, the AFR Grad Connection one, but then also with Prosper as well. And they measure very, very different things to get that result. So I'm really curious as we now get into leading into this conversation around connecting with your grads, being more authentic and knowing your background to get to this job, How have you created this sense of success with the program?
It's definitely true that we've done very well, especially in the last couple of years. And February was a really good month for us. I was obviously delighted. But you're right, Steve. It doesn't go without a huge amount of teamwork and perspiration. I know it seems like a cheesy thing to say, but it's a cliche, but it's a good cliche. That's the reality. I lean a lot around the people around me, and because of our culture, we genuinely have people that want to help grads develop, and become the best version of themselves. I have people that I can bring in to mentor them, to teach them classes, and I barely have to really lift a finger, when it comes to getting people to help. Sitting in the middle of the program, I do have my own sort of philosophy about the way that things should work. And as I sort of mentioned before, I kind of think about myself in those shoes as a graduate 10 years ago, as an older grad. I knew, already, I knew nothing about consulting. I knew a little bit about computers, but in truth be told, there was massive imposter syndrome. I had no idea what I was doing. So I always look at that person and I thought, what would that person want in a graduate program? What would he want somebody to said to him in the first couple of weeks? What's the halftime speech that they needed? So my approach is always, putting the grad at the center of the process, giving them that, trying to sort of foment that satisfaction in the program with all of my grads. I'm very personable with them from the get-go, and I try and make sure that, they don't feel like they're just a number, that when they arrive, they have someone that advocates for them, that supports them and understands where they're at in the journey. I always make a point of sharing my journey with them.
Yeah.
And my thoughts and feelings. They could be the most confident grad in the world. They could, be raring to go from day one. But I know that there are elements of doubt. I feel like my job before they enter the business is to clarify that those doubts are normal and that I was in the exact same shoes as them, and there's nothing to be afraid of. They can enter on day one. Everybody is in the same place as you in that cohort. You need to support each other, not be competitive with them. A little bit of competitiveness is okay, but above and beyond, you need to be uplifting each other because you're all in the same space and you all benefit from the shared knowledge. I even write them a card, and this seems like the most insane thing that, to do. And people always raise their eyebrows when I do this.
Yeah.
But, and sometimes, crikey, I've got like 50 or 60 of them to get through. But, I go and I buy the cards. I make a point of buying them at my own expense. I write every single card and I individualize it to each person that I've spoken to on the phone, and I send that to them. And that way, I think that they know, okay, James has my back. The company cares about not me as sort of a person on the project, but they care about my development. They want me to have a good experience. And I feel that that's something that not a lot of people would do. But sometimes I think you have to do those things that normally not a lot of people would do, to get that success.
Yeah.
Or maybe I'm crazy.
No, clearly not. You've got the awards to prove that you're not. What I'm getting is a sense of empathy that you have for the graduates who are coming through. Let's try to tie that into a business metric. How has that helped with retention?
Really well. We have sometimes our years ebb and flow of the economy,
of course,
as you'd expect. But we have had a year where we've had 100%.
100%?
100%. Yes.
Wonderful. And that wouldn't just be because of the care and empathy that you're providing. You've got a culture of supporting the graduates at Capgemini. It sounds like you've got some really good leadership buy-in, and that just hasn't. But can you give us a couple of examples of how leaders do lean in to nurturing graduates through their journey at Capgemini?
Yeah, absolutely. I love the question because it's something that we get sort of buy-in, and we've changed CEOs over the years as well, but both of them have been excellent in their support. I'm not just saying that because they'll be listening, but they've genuinely supported me very well. Look, I make sure that I invite them to speak to the grads on day one.
Okay.
Not just the CEO, but also the COO and some of the other leaders of our different business lines, which is how we're sort of comprised as a business. We have 12 of them.
Yeah. So they would welcome the grads, 100%, spend some time with them. Yep.
100%. I booked our CEO for half an hour traditionally. And then he got back to me and said, James, it's not enough. I want an hour.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, but he was a grad himself. He's a fascinating guy. He was a grad himself in the 90s, and he knows. And I make sure the grads know that as well, and I ask him to speak from that experience. And I find that our leaders are quite approachable, and we do have the sort of flat hierarchy structure. And again, sounds like buzzwords, but it really is the case. I mean, I've not only worked in this part of the program and delivered this program, I've also been a consultant. I've also worked on projects. I've also worked with leaders, and I think with our leadership, I've never really been in a place where I've been sort of reticent about giving my opinion on something, and I've always felt like I was justified in giving that opinion as long as it came from a genuine place, and I feel that our leaders, make time, genuinely make time for our grads, and that helps me a lot. So, I mean, it's another reason why I benefit from our culture.
Yeah. And I guess it's fabulous to hear that Capgemini are doing that irrespective of the input that you're putting in. But I know through our conversations and even seeing some of the stuff that you post on LinkedIn, your warmth, your empathy, your passion for your grads, that has to be helping to continually maintain the rage. And, like you said, what can be, the ebbs and flows of the external economic environment.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they all make fun of me on my LinkedIn. They all think I'm an absolute dork. but yeah, it's such a useful tool to connect with them and use social media and just show people what we're doing in the space and show people how we're connecting with universities and student societies and Deakin University we both go to it quite a bit is it part? I'd like to think so. I'd like to think it's a factor, but I well and truly believe that people want to stay at a place they enjoy working, and I've always thought that was our unique selling point, was our culture and our sense of balance.
And you mentioned an opportunity where the CEO wanted to book an hour to welcome the grads. How long is the graduate program at Capgemini? Is that an 18-month or a 2-year program?
It's a really good question because I think we're quite unique in that respect. We're 12 months.
12 months, okay.
And I tend to believe that that's on the shorter side based on what I've seen.
It would be, but that isn't necessarily a bad thing, though.
I don't think so. I as well. I think for us, what it allows is for kind of instant progression, because what we aim to do is auto promote our grads after the first year. They have this tag called associate consultant. Okay. The idea is after 12 months they kind of lose that associate tag and become a consultant with the company. Obviously they're permanent employees. I think that's standard across the industry. I'm not sure, but 12 months allows them, I think, to pack in quite a lot. And after that sort of 12 months, we sort of expect them. They still benefit from the pastoral care of the alumni network, and I'm still very open to. I always speak to them. I always connect with them, and I want to maintain a very large and supportive alumni network. Ultimately, I lean on them to mentor the next batch of grads as well. Yeah. So those relationships are really important. But yeah, it's 12 months. We aim to do, at least a couple of master classes a month that are general. So we teach them the sort of the for want of a better word, soft skills in consulting. We call that our core consulting skills. But they also, in their business line, have somebody who's responsible for their sort of subject matter learning, which is obviously really important. If they're in, data or management consulting, it's a little bit different. But they all have sophisticated programs to that degree as well. So there's a layer beneath that. And the first 2 weeks are entirely spent on sort of the rudimentary and elementary soft skills that they need to learn, or we think they need to learn, at least to be, ready for project.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I really want to unpack how the executive team really lean in here. So it's a 12-month program. The CEO or executives within the business come in and give their spiel at the start. Where are the opportunities for them to continue to connect into the grad program, and how are you advocating for them to come along for the whole journey from start to finish?
Yeah. Well, one of the first things I did when the new CEO comes in, and I tend to always try and seize this opportunity for really
Booking
early
into the next
audience.
one.
Yeah. Is that I get them to sponsor the program. So they are the sponsor of the program. So automatically I kind of have their buy-in. And luckily I've been in, two separate situations where both were former graduates and love the idea of growing our business from the ground up. They're very supportive on many levels. And I think besides sort of being very open with the grads, making sure that they get their audience, they have an audience with them on day one. They also make time to be approachable in the office as well.
Okay.
Our CEO, he's always at he always comes to our office social events. He's always there. He makes a point of being known that he's not scary. Can be a little bit intimidating, and there can be that empowerment and balance from day one. So they definitely do things like that. And he's always sort of he'll address his his sort of monthly updates to the wider business, and whenever we win these sort of awards and things, or we have these accolades, he's usually the first person to promote it in his channels as well. So we always feel like we have that sort of constant support. Yeah. As much as he could sort of give given his schedule, but yeah.
This episode is brought to you by Video My Job, your go-to platform for creating branded employee videos at scale with zero editing. Authentic employee stories are the key to showcasing your culture and attracting top talent. Book a demo on our website and learn how to create hundreds of videos in under 60 days with full support from start to finish.
Knowing that we started this conversation out at talking about, empathy, belonging, and hearing, I guess, the amount of effort that you personally put into your grads. How do you, or what is your philosophy, or at least Capgemini's philosophy from a candidate perspective, right? Because I think you hinted before we started recording that your application numbers are significant.
Yeah.
So if you maybe want to give us the quantum of what we're about to talk about, but really curious to then go, well, how do you start to foster or create that sense of empathy with students that may drop out right at the very first gate of your recruitment process?
Yeah, I mean, when I started, it was a very different number to what it is now, and it's very large. So I mean, if I include internships in, last year I was dealing with 50,000 applications. Slightly north of that.
Wow.
So
okay.
Is that international people applying as well, not just people? Because let's face it, Capgemini, global business. Off air, you mentioned 350,000 employees worldwide. Are people internationally applying for the positions?
Absolutely. Yeah. So from abroad they are, and internally, and it's a mix of. Obviously international students as well.
Yep.
And I think that's also a big selling point of our program. We are open to international students. We take people on a 485 visa. That's been one of the things that I've been wanting to advocate for a while, and we're scaling the number of international students we bring in as well as our program increases with popularity. But yeah, it's a huge number. It's very, very difficult to manage, but somehow we get there.
That is a really good number to have, though. Like, it would create. It's not like 50,000 just landed. I'm assuming that it's progressively increased, and you've created your capability to be able to manage that. But clearly you're saying no to a lot of people. How are you managing that no in a soft, delightful, nice, lovingly way?
Yeah, it's a. You're right. The number of applications, it's a problem, but it's kind of a good problem to have.
Yeah, your talent pool would increase, more selection, etc. We clearly see the benefit. That's incredible, but
absolutely, and and I'll be quite frank. I don't know if we've got this completely right, because it is a new problem, but candidate experience is obviously very important to us and how we handle that. What we've just been trying to do is just give, consistent and meaningful communication, back to our applicants, especially if our applications are open for a very long time. Sometimes when you're in an in-demand, an on-demand business and you rely on the availability of project work, and we want our graduates to come in with project work, right? We don't want them to be sitting on chairs twiddling their thumbs and having nothing to do. So, we have to really have to really think about our pipeline and when we do that. So when the best opportune time, when all the projects are sort of landing in the one place, that's generally when we want to bring in our grads. So we just are really deliberate and intentional about our communication. You would like to think, I don't think we always get it right. But I think the key thing is just checking with the candidates. These are the projected timelines, and updating that. It's sometimes when we mail these grads, it crashes the system, quite frankly, because there's so many applicants. I try and one of the things that I do though, I mean, usually when you get candidates who are very tenacious, they go to these university events, and you probably know me, Steve. I'm quite front-facing. I aim to be on the battlefield quite a lot, and I do a lot of external.
Is that attending a university event?
Yeah.
Is that the front line?
It can be. I can. We've gone to like AAGE. Career expos where you might be speaking to people 10, 15, 20 deep at some stage, right? You don't feel the war for talent as much as you then see every other business that you are naturally competing with looking super attractive at the same time.
Yeah, 100%. And, there's usually like a line of students that's, God knows how long, but and you're usually saying the same thing over and over again, usually in a lot of circumstances. But if it relates to applications, look, I always try and give them the projections there and then, and I use that opportunity to be very frank about, when those applications are either coming out or when we're likely to interview and when we're likely to hire.
Are they the main questions that you get at the stand or from applications? And then instead of having onesie twosie type conversations, how are you? Have you taken that step to scale that communication to manage their expectation? How did you go about doing it if you have?
Yeah, the first one I always get is, are you open to international students?
Okay.
Yeah, because
cool.
There's such an enormous pool of them, and because we recruit them, not a lot of not a lot of companies in our position do.
Yeah.
That makes us tremendously popular with them. So it's usually questions about visa conditions.
Gotcha.
I've got so many of these questions now that usually on my LinkedIn, what I do now is periodically, I'll release answers to the most commonly asked questions.
Amazing.
And there's usually I think I've got a couple of posts up there now which I can just link to the grads already. Usually it does answer their question, and it's just it's just by virtue of experience.
Yeah.
I kind of know. Occasionally I'll get a real wild one, but usually it's a set of 10 to 20 that I'm asked. And
I really love that. That's real practical advice to improve the candidate experience. It talks to the nurturing, having an FAQ, or being aware of the curiosity and questions that come through from a candidate before they apply. I'd like to dig a little bit deeper for those who are considering opening up the talent pool and getting those international students. There are students that have, or grads that have been successfully placed in Capgemini, and I'm assuming their candidate experience is a little bit different. How are you nurturing those people as they, leave their country of birth and then they come to a city that they're not very familiar with? Is that a different journey in the view of Capgemini, and how are you managing that?
Yeah, it absolutely is. And I have such tremendous sort of pride in my international students and the journey that they've gone through. And some of them have just the most unique stories. and because their opportunities are so limited, that they really do give you so much, and I always try and tell them from the get-go, I'm in a way, I'm just like you. I was born in Perth. I was raised in the Middle East. I did my high school in Malaysia. I moved to New Zealand for my master's. I started in Capgemini, Sydney. My wife's a Kiwi Korean with Japanese blood, and I've got done a DNA test. I've got every genetic known to the sun. So like living around the world and being exposed to different cultures. I think I do have a little bit of experience with that, and I think that was the most enriching gift that was ever given to me growing up abroad. It's not something that I worked hard for; it just sort of fell into my lap. I was lucky, and I got to experience different cultures, and my family's multicultural, and we speak 2 languages at home. So I always try and meet them from a place where you have every reason to be just as confident, you're equally as deserving. And the path might have been a little bit rockier, but look at where you've arrived, and look how well you've done. And I always take the international students that we have employed, and I always take them to events that are specifically for international students and let them to speak to international students, because I know that those international students really need to hear from somebody like them, and it's really important that they have someone to aspire to. I've got a couple, and they have such unique stories. I have a guy that was spent 18 years in the Indian military, and he's just a fascinating guy, and they have brilliant stories, and they work so hard.
So getting to know your graduates sort of plugs into that sense of empathy. As you look to onboard international students or anyone who's relocating, there are a number of steps you have to go through to really ensure you're going to get the most out of them. Where they, what are a few of those things that you're looking to tick off to make sure that they're comfortable?
Yeah, usually they're applying within the country, because with our 485, we unfortunately can't employ anyone who's applied from abroad who hasn't had that Australian visa and bridged onto that. Bridged onto that working visa. Might be something that we do in the future, especially when we get a little bit more mobile, because we have graduate programs in all sorts of different countries. But yeah, no, I certainly know that there are the unique challenges that they struggle with, and I think that's just keeping my door open, really. I always say from day one, my phone number is completely, you can call it at any time. I'm available on the weekends. I do have a toddler, but I do have occasionally downtime. I'll get back to you. If you ever feel that there's something that you need, or you need someone to help you out and you don't have that help, I will give it to you. If it's looking for a house, if it's trying to secure a rental application, those sorts of things, I'll guide you through it and we'll work together. I think that sort of helps me, especially connect with the grad in a way that, they're more trusting of me. They're better at sharing information with me, particularly about how they're struggling, and then I'm better able to help them. So I think those relationships are really important. Not too dissimilar to the ones I already have with our grads. But I do recognize their unique challenges. They do have them for sure.
It's just empathy in spades with you, James. I think for the other program managers or future program managers that are out there, how do you make sure that you're balancing your own emotional energy and space while trying to clearly give everything of yourself to your grads, your applicants, your cohort? How do you strike that balance to prevent burnout or make sure that you're not overextending yourself and then running into other issues down the track?
Become a comedian.
I don't know if I've fully worked it out yet, if I'm honest. I certainly do burn the candle at both ends. It's the program role is all encompassing. It's not just recruitment, as you know. It's the program management, it's the partnership management, it's the external facing side, it's the marketing, it's the pastoral care. There's so many elements to the role. it's so multifaceted. And to be honest, I run it like a project with several streams, just as I did really in consulting. So the operational side, is kind of is kind of something that I'm used to in a way. It's just kind of like running a really big project. But I'm pretty open with the grads about how I'm vulnerable too. I try and sort of not talk to them from a pedestal because, we're all human beings. Honestly, on the second day when I make them aware of our mental health resources, I'm very open about the fact that I struggle with obsessive compulsive disorder. It's something that I've had my whole life, and it's something that I'm still that I manage. And quite frankly, as an adult, I've managed to work out exactly how to do that. But I still have my bad days, and I'm not always smiling ear to ear. And I try and tell them, like, I'm a human being as well, and I struggle. And I think what that does, that's not the easiest thing to do. It's not the easiest thing to be open about your mental health. But what it does do is it sort of empowers other people to sort of be more open themselves. It encourages them to be open with each other. I'm quite lucky. I have a like a supportive family to go home to every day, and I have a really, really boring pastime of enjoying walks around the neighborhood to clear my head. But I always, at least from the grad's point of view, I tell them, some of the things that I actually pass the things that I do that I think I do well, with striking that balance, but also some of the areas that I've fallen short, so that I share that with them and they don't make the same mistake.
Yeah, both success and failure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think I was worse at that when I was a graduate coming in, and that's where I think that my radar always goes off, because I think they're some of the highest risk people for that, for those sorts of things happening. But for me, I do the pickups, and what the pickups do, they encourage me always to leave at 5, because I have to. I'm always going to be sitting there, and I'll be the dad that arrives last, So I'm always thinking about, oh crikey, I can't let that happen, If he's third last, maybe that's okay.
Yeah, but definitely
and what that forces me to do is really collide with the most important side of my life, which isn't work. It's my son, and that's really the area that gives me the most joy. So at least until around when I go to bed, which is around 10 o'clock. Sorry to bore you with all the minutiae of my life, but that's 5 hours that are really important to me, and I have that every day, and that's what encourages me and makes me happy.
So there's a really interesting juxtaposition here that's starting to come out, where clearly you're everything to your grads: emotional support, program support, cultural integration for your international students. How do you then ensure that there's not a drop-off or a disconnect with their hiring managers or the people that are responsible for them day to day? Because that, talking to many other program managers out there, the quintessential challenge is you can provide them the best program experience. The risk can be that it falls over when they actually spend time doing their day job with their managers who may not be as invested, as emotionally intelligent, as clearly what you are. How do you then make sure that disconnect then isn't felt, that can really become quite jarring for your grads?
Yeah, well, I mean, you've seen sort of that, like, I've talked a little bit about the fluffy side of James in my program and sort of stuff, but where I get a little bit more militant is aligning on vision. And I always make sure from the get-go that a precursor, or at least caveat for hiring grads would be, you have to get on page with the program philosophy and why we do it. If you want to bring in somebody who just sort of sits on a seat and does a job, that's an A5, that's a consultant. But if it's a graduate, it's a different kind of experience. But thankfully, because we've had the success that we've had, people do buy in. So I do make my demands very clear. And, you know, I tell people these are the standards that we have to reach. And if you want to be on board and hire graduates, this is what we commit to. And thankfully, having a lot of buy-in these days. You know, I can't pretend that we were always perfect. Obviously, we do. You know, we've had those issues. We're not perfect. We're like anybody else. But what I always have the power to do is to have somebody in each business line who represents the grads from a development level as well. And I know, and often, you know, I've had a role in selecting these people that they have the same sort of attitude towards graduates that I do, that they're people that the graduates can really lean on, people who genuinely care about their development. It's not just sort of someone who, you know, needs an extra notch on their end of year performance review or something like that. It's always somebody that, you know, actually cares about, you know, where they arrive. Different personality types, and that's fine. It would be, I wouldn't want people in the graduate space to just have my personality. It wouldn't work. Yeah. But I make sure that at least these people have a warmth and an ambition and a motivation to get grads from point A to point B.
Militant James, I'd love to see that. That's another episode within itself. I feel like we could talk for quite some time, along with all the guests. I feel like I'm saying that a lot as we sort of come towards the end. Is there a last question you'd like to ask Stephen before we unfortunately finish up?
No, I think it was just more a comment on how clearly, you know, working within the Capgemini culture, and, you know, I know that you and Gianni have kind of been particularly instrumental in driving that cultural change around the grad program. But please correct me if I'm wrong, James, but that alignment between business vision, business culture, but having the grad program almost kind of come in and shift that culture to ensure that there is alignment. It's not just you fitting in with the business, it's equally the business fitting in with, you know, the program's vision as well. Would that be correct?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I got a few funny looks when they wanted me to go, when I asked them to go on Prospel TikTok. You know, I had to walk them through that a little bit. But yeah, no, certainly we need to be there's a value proposition for the business. Yeah. You know, and that's bringing graduates with, look, we're a tech company as well, with all the right skills. You know, if you think about, I don't need to tell you guys about generative AI and how important that is, and I'm sure, you know, most of your guests would tell you the same. You know, and those skills out there are, they're incredibly important. My gosh, you know, and we even make them do our data grads. We make them do a Gen AI project. It's amazing what they can do. So the business does benefit from those sort of amazing skills that are you know, arising out of the universities, but there's also the value proposition for the graduates as well. You know, they need to sort of do work that adds value, absolutely, but also work that's meaningful to them, because that's the only way that will keep them on board. Yeah.
And then ensuring that, you know, like we were saying before, that the vision, the values of the program, you're not being dictated to by the business. There does feel like there's this really great partnership between both sides. I mean, obviously having the CEO as a very strong advocate and demanding more time with your grads is definitely a benefit to you as well.
Yeah. It is an inspiring story, isn't it? Something that I'm sure a lot of the listeners would love to you know, level up at least to, but yeah, I mean.
Yeah, I think there's a wistfulness there of almost, I know it's not a utopian environment, James, because we all have our own individual challenges, but it definitely sounds as though, you know, you've really struck the right chord between, you know, the program being dictated to by the business, but then the program doing the reverse as well. And Militant James very clearly saying, this is a big thing. You know, if you want to be part of the program and you want a grad, you know, this is the standard that we set. And if you're not into that, then that's okay. But go and hire an experienced person instead.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, you know, with success, they sort of start to buy in and see how it's different. Yeah, you know, and it is different. It's not like hiring a lateral hire. It's such a different experience. But you can do so many amazing things with the next generation of workforce by, you know, giving a graduate program that encourages them, you know, to be their authentic self. I think it means a lot. And I've been in this role. I'm approaching about 4 years, I think, but I've learned really so much. But you can, by having a certain attitude, by having a positive attitude towards a graduate, you can really change the trajectory of their life and even the way that they see themselves.
I feel like we've learnt a little bit in this episode. I'm sure for our listeners they have as well. The sense of belonging, authenticity, it really shines, and your sense of empathy as well. Thank you for joining us, James.
Oh, my pleasure. Actually went by really quickly.
I get any good conversation doesn't feel like an effort.
100%.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Great to have you on, mate.
Lovely to be here. I enjoyed it.